Oh, these things are huge and take up so much space. Oh, maybe we should go chronological or chronological. I was thinking that chronologically most of it. Shh. Benefix episode 3. The much awaited for and much talked about upcoming resource episode I wanted to cover this week. Mostly because it really had no effect on the recent ROC, as it had no resources, but it's something that does come up in a lot of major competitive tournaments, depending on where you go. Most importantly being, of course, Worlds and Regionals and Nationals and that kind of stuff. So, getting into it, I want to start in the early days, one of the first resources, with the Infinity Gauntlet. It's a 40 point beat stick maker, basically. Or rather, a beat stick improver. What it does is it effectively gives you power cosmic without using the exact word power cosmic. You got willpower, as a result you didn't take pushing damage. And your powers and abilities, I think it's just your actually powers, couldn't be countered. In addition, it has a 26 click dial for a number of clicks up to click number 15, having 3 gems and a power showing. You get the effects of the 3 gems plus the effect of the power, obviously. Oh my goodness! Oh, this is not good for my cold. And yeah. So it's a very cool effect. And then once you get into the numbers, the number 1 allows you to choose any of the gems that are on your gauntlet. The number 2 gives you +1 to all your stats and lets you choose a power at the beginning of your turn. And then eventually the number 3 shows up and effectively gives you all the effects on the gauntlet, +2 to all your stats, and a choice of power at the beginning of your turn. It's a fairly well balanced piece, and it's 40 points when it's full. You only get the extra effects of the unoutwittable and non-pushing when it is full, so you do have to pay the full 40 for that. And it can get a little touchy towards the end. You got a lot of choices to make with it. When it first showed up, I do have to say, the effect in the game it had was vast. Every team, except for like maybe 2 or 3 in the top 16 of the Worlds the year it showed up, had the team, or had the resource. But the teams were very great deal when it showed up. So, what it basically does is it makes your tent pole, it gives your tent pole all those missing elements. Certain powers and so on. So, overall, if I was to rate the Infinity Gauntlet, it's good. Given the current collection of resources, as I get further, you'll understand. It's not the best anymore. It's most certainly still fantastic, but the amount of time it takes to get going in comparison to some of the other ones, you might not have time to do anything with it. So that's my thoughts on the Gauntlet. Still good, not the best. Next up, in chronological order, was a utility belt. Now, a lot of the pieces didn't show up on it in turn, but basically, a utility belt, not only does it say what it does, it's got a lot of intermittent combat modifiers, which is what made it very amazing. In addition to the click number 1 showing the special power number 1, which allowed you to take a double power action and turn any dial. Now, that has since been nerfed in, of course, the watch list rules, and you can no longer go to any old click. It's got to be a click without a power. It was very common to see people using Ghost Rider. Well, okay, it was very super common to be seeing people using Ghost Rider with this prep timing to the flurry click with +2 to its stats, and then using the Heroes for Hire team of ATA to perform some shenanigans. Now, when I say the Infinity Gauntlet makes a great figure good, the utility belt has the potential to make a lot of figures really good. Like if I was to say what you put, if I was to put an Infinity Gauntlet on anything, the figure wouldn't be any less than 120 to maybe 150 points. Or more, depending on the size of your game. Remember, for those of you who are familiar with Metafix, we focus on the 300-point metagame, which is the competitive metagame, which is the one WizKids balances their game for. The utility belt, on the other hand, I can name quite a few figures that are 80 points alone that well, okay, but quite a few. I'm focusing fully on Iron Fist. But Iron Fist is a great target for this. Hawkeyes are a good target for this. Just any general, any figure can be made great with a utility belt, especially if the right cowl is chosen too. Never underestimate the power of giving a character stealth, or for that matter, super strength and battle fury. One of those things to note, especially if you're thinking about a character like the Iron Fist, imagine the potential of the Iron Fist was super strength and battle fury. He won't care about shape changes. He's not mind controllable, so he can stop those Brother Voodoos from mind controlling him. But super strength gives him the ability to pick up a heavy object and smack for the already 3 damage that he deals. So he makes an already pretty good 80-point character who's min-maxed pretty amazing. So think of the min-max potential, going back to that episode, of an 80-point figure with 100 points of potential for 14 points more. pretty amazing still. So if I was to choose between the Infinity Gauntlet and the Bat Belt, you're more likely to see me use the Bat Belt, mostly because you'll have more room in your team to finesse around some extra points into your team. A good example is the difference between the Infinity Gauntlet and the Bat Belt could be the difference between 50-point and 75-point Scarlet Witch, which is, the difference between TK and no TK. That's one way of looking at it. There's other ways of looking at it, and that's not the supreme way. It's just one way to look at it. Next up, okay, this one's just silly, and I love him anyway. It's the Penguin resource. He's playable at 10 points. A very common issue with him is he's somewhat unreliable. He's kind of focused similar to the Phoenix in the way he looks. And the fact that, as well, he's assigned to your whole team. And there's some some things out there that nerf resources hard. So the Penguin is one of those guys that kind of can screw over your whole team against, let's say, 10th anniversary Iron Man. So it's something to think about in that effect. But what he does is every click adds +2 to a stat, adds a power, and also adds -1 to a stat. Every turn you roll for it. If you roll a 6, you get to choose which click it sits on. If you roll a 1, he goes away, and you heal the assigned character or click. Every turn you got to assign a character. And if you roll a 2 to 5, you click it once. It does have a KO click, so when it goes away, it goes away. Honestly, the Penguin fits in any team. You know what? There's no situation where I would put the Penguin in over a 10-point belt. I can't think of one. Especially considering that the belt has the potential to add willpower. I didn't mention earlier. I think it takes 3 items to... I don't have the card handy. I should probably be reading these things and researching at the time. I always use a full belt myself, so I consider the belt 14 points. But there's actually a lot of situations where a 10-point, 11-point belt is just necessary. So, So, yeah, so at minimum it costs 8. If you have how many objects? Where are the rules? Oh my goodness, I do not use this. If 3 or more items aren't it, the character can use Indomitable. So, it's another thing to think about when you're including 10 points of the Penguin or 10 points of the utility belt. Is the Penguin can be assigned any character at any point in your team, but the utility belt will offer up the willpower plus all those extra stat bonuses, and doesn't really go away like the Penguin can potentially. This next one's hard not to talk about because it's big, it's important, and it's hard to put together, so you're only getting this. It's the Book of the Skulls. This one is a hard one to talk about, mostly in the fact that it's good. It makes a lot of figures great. Any team with the Book of Skulls becomes unstoppably awesome. It's the only way I can describe it, is the Book of Skulls makes figures amazing. But there's a caveat to that, is it does take a lot of actions to start handing out hammers. which is why when I refer to the Book of Skulls, I like to think of it as a 50-point resource with 3 keywords. Split Lip is what I would like to refer to as the accelerator of the Book of Skulls. Especially now that the wording has been clarified in the post-watch list player's guide. The Book of Skulls now reads whenever a character would roll for a relic, as opposed to it takes a power action to pick up an object, it's an automatic. So we've been playing with these rules. It's official. When you drop a hammer on a figure with Split Lip out there, you're picking that up for free. It took no time to do it. You get a free quake out of it. It's the effects are astronomically amazing. Emphasis on the ass if you're on the other end of the board from a Book of Skulls with Split Lip on the board. Now the fact that Split Lip is somewhat limited in its keywords does, like, it limits the theme teams that are effective with it. One of which I'm going to be talking about later, and is a team I'm starting to think is going to have a potential. Asgardian is also making a big splash now because there's so many splashable characters for the team now. The new Thor at 100 points is very playable in 300. The new Thor at 200 points is very playable in a 300-point team with a Book of Skulls, with Split Lip, and let's say 2 Asgardian Trolls. You've still got a numbers game. You've got more figures than your opponent. And with the Book of Skulls accelerating the power of the Trolls, you can see where I'm going with this. Those 25-point Trolls become very, very effective murderers or damagers or backup figures to the Thor, plus their late dial regeneration. Unless you're doing 4 damage every time you hit a Troll, Trolls are going to be a problem for you, in addition to a 200-point Thor, who's got 8 range multi-target. When he multi-targets, he does penetrating damage, who could be carrying around a Split Lip with enhancement. Do you see what I just did there? This is scary. Stark Industries is another one that becomes amazing with Split Lip on the board as well. I can think of one figure, the new Ironmonger, who lets you wildcard your opponent's team abilities and subsequently steal them too. So he can take your opponent's Mystic's team ability away. I wish you had that figure. Take your opponent's Mystic's team ability away, get some bonuses from hammers courtesy of Split Lip, and shoot with no fear of retaliation for the Mystic's team ability. In addition to, you know, extra effects of Iron Man's, who ignore blocking and hindering, and so on. I could go on. The potential for the Book of Skulls is amazing. And that's not even getting past the fact that every single hammer adds +2 to your attack. Some kind of neat effect, and an extra set of abilities on the dial to one character on your team per turn, which, you know, is inclusive of +3 Pulse Wave, Perplex, Probability Control, Outwit, Impervious, and bleh. As well as +2 to all the stats, etc. There's a whole lot of potential inside of this thing that can get very scary. And in the wrong hands or the wrong team, I've honestly spun it 3 times in single turns because of the way it spins. So, yeah. Book of Skulls, in my opinion, where the Infinity Gauntlet makes a character good, the Utility Belt makes a figure great, the Book of Skulls makes a team absolutely amazing. So, yeah. Now, when I move on to the next couple, you're going to start seeing a little bit of a balancing element start to kind of occur. It seems the Book of Skulls was where WizKids started to go, we might be getting a little silly with some of these things. But at the same time, the next 2, I haven't actually seen the full potential of the resources themselves. We're going to start with the power plant. To scale, this thing is huge, guys. And I've got a gigantic head, but the rings won't stay in. This thing, kind of like the Book of Skulls, hands out a utility ring. Now, here's where I got to make a comment with regards to this versus the Book of Skulls. The Book of the Skulls adds stats in addition to the extra stats, in addition to the extra powers that you get. Some of them include toughness, charge, running shot, etc. This adds a lot of utility powers, but not a lot of stats. What that means is, when you start, like, the way this works is every turn you hand out a ring, and the character you hand the ring to gets that ring until they clear. So you can see some rings on there for two, 3 turns. I mean, there's potential in it. But you're kind of hoping that the stats are there when you put the ring there. It's not like the Book of Skulls where you get the extra stats from the book and from the hammers. This is, you're kind of hoping everything's there to make these things work. Now, there's a lot of utility ones that let you put barriers, that let you kind of hesitate certain things. There's one that destroys resources itself, but you got to roll a 10 or 11. Or is it a 10 or higher? Something like that. So, while I think this is good, it doesn't have the strength potential of the Book of the Skulls, and ultimately costs the same. So if I was to choose one over the other, I'd have to say the Book of Skulls over the power plant, mostly in the fact that the Book of Skulls makes characters great, whereas this just kind of adds Swiss Army knife potential. Now remember, I'm not saying these things are bad when I say they're not as good or not that great, etc. I am saying, in the sense of a metagame competitiveness, this doesn't have the same competitive edge that, say, the Book of Skulls has. It's cool looking. The rings are neat in the fact that, you know, I could be pimping myself out as the Mandarin myself just by wearing the rings and carrying the power plant with me because, you know, I have the power plant. That's all fine and dandy, right? But, I mean, you can't, and of course you can't pimp like this with other resources. I have 6 of the rings, give me a break. So, that is the power plant in a nutshell. Now, the last one to talk about, and the most recent addition to the resource pool until the Green Lantern power battery comes out for War of the Light, is the most recent event one, AVX. Now, I'm probably dating the video when I say the most recent one, but that's okay. Now, this one's a tricky one because for certain purposes, I've come up with some ideas for it, but in order to make it the most effective, the team you make, you lose a little bit of ground and leeway with regards to making your team. As well, it's not like the utility belt where you add 14 points and you can just add it at the end. It's not like the Book of Skulls where you have 50 points, you got 3 keywords you can work with, or you can just make a team around the extra 50 points. This is an awkward number, 42. And when you spend the 42 on it, you need to have 5 figures assigned. So let's take it back. From 42, it goes to 39, and you got to have 4 figures assigned to it. Yeah. Now, that's great, but all those figures have to be 40 points or more. So in a 300-point game, you're playing with, you're resourcing 4 times, 4 60-point characters, 5 60-point characters. Do you see what's going on here? Is you're not getting the right number of point effectiveness. So we have to bring it down some points, another 3 points to 36, so you're only assigning it to 3 characters. Now, 3 characters is a little bit more reasonable to work with. You can probably let's go outrageous and go 3 Iron Fists, because when it comes to the min-max point value awesomeness, Iron Fist is a good choice to play 3 of. I mean, that's the supreme cheese level. But when you do that, 3 characters are assigned, and 2 of your resources remain. Now, the 2 resources that you remain will power up your Iron Fists, or characters, your 3 characters. Now, they can average around 80 points, but they've all got to be 40 or over. Take that into effect. Now, the first click, the way every click on this works is based on the number of resource or of the Phoenix Flames that you have on the dial left before assigning Phoenix Flames to each character. That's the blue number that's going to be showing on the top. So if you, let's say, in the case of the 5, you spend 42 points and you assign 5 characters this resource, you're going to be pointing at the 0, 1 dial. And once with that showing, all the characters that are assigned Phoenix Flame, I'm going to call them Phoenix Flames because it just seems to make the most sense for me right now. Every character that's assigned a Phoenix Flame gets the bonuses that are on the dial. Now this one has not so much diminishing as it has exponential returns on that, and the fact that the more you spend on it, the more figures are affected by it, so the more spread the powers have. But the less resources that are on the dial, the less dials in you are, and the less powerful the dials in are of themselves. So, as a recap, the most powerful dial on on the Phoenix Force, we'll say, for a single figure is a 31? It's 42 minus 12. No, it's a 30-point resource on a single figure on the fourth dial, as there will be 4 resources on it, which even its first click has +2 to a stat and starts with telekinesis and invulnerable. Pretty amazing in and of itself. And then, now, the other thing about the Phoenix Force that's worth noting is it's hard to goddamn move. The dial doesn't move on its own like, say, the utility belt, where all you gotta do is take an action, or the same with the Infinity Gauntlet, or the Book of Skulls, which just requires one of your team characters with a hammer to do some damage, possibly kill something. This, in order to move one click, has to kill something, or you have to roll doubles on a hit. That's hard to move. In 300 points, I have a hard time saying this is going to make a huge splash, but there's potential in it. I can see a good min-maxed 3-character team with 2 of the resources, one of them being the Mystics one at range and the Colossus invulnerable, making a very effective 3-figure team, one of which being, I love Iron Fist, so I'm going to keep bringing him up, and we'll say 2 other figures. But as well, I can see maybe a strange swarm that I didn't see coming with 1 dial left on it and some strange shenanigans. Because one of the things you do have to remember as well is each of the figures that's assigned these Phoenix Force flames gets poison. They get flight. A couple of mistakes we made in some of the videos is flight. The flight ability, not the flight symbol on the base. So you can't carry, but you do ignore terrain for movement purposes, etc., and characters while moving. You still have to break away, but so there's that. But the power distribution on this as well is very late dial, so play it how you feel like. We're going to be experimenting with this a fair bit, but I don't see it being as potent as the Book of Skulls. But at the same time, it works faster than the Book of Skulls, because the Book of Skulls takes, even with Split Lip, takes at least 2 turns to get going, whereas this is there turn 1. So, like I said, we're going to experiment with it some more on the videos, and once we get the full dial of it moving, we'll see how it goes. We've already tried the Phoenix Force in our AVX videos. That's kind of limiting the playing field with it. So pretty soon we're going to... I figure in May, we have March's event and April's event. So at the end of April, or whenever we start playing in April, you're going to be seeing full Phoenix styles show up in some of our games. We will... So that we can hope to get some extra potential out of it. Until then, I'm offering the best I can offer with this thing. Now, I'll say it again. The Phoenix Force is good. I don't see it as good as the Book of Skulls yet, but I need some more time to play with it, because I've abused the Book of Skulls to a great degree. I haven't met the Dark Phoenix yet, or the Phoenix Force. So, that said, that was our episode on resources. We hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned in a couple extra minutes, or a couple extra seconds. I'm going to go over the most recent ROC posted in the HC realms. So, I had a couple seconds, needed to take a couple seconds myself to look at some of the team lists that made the ROC event in, location, I suck, Huntsville, Alabama. So I want to start by congratulating, now I apologize for the name if I messed this up. Congratulations to Patrick Yabjoko for winning the event. His team was the Marvel 10th Anniversary Dark Phoenix. The Question at 100 points. I'm not familiar with that one, but my research team over there might help me out with that.
Question? Is that the Trinity of Sin question?
That's probably the Trinity of Sin question at 100 points. Thank you, Amber. The 79 point, of course, Brother Voodoo, and the GCPD motorcycle with the GCPD ATA. Did he watch my min-max episode? Now, I'm not 100% sure, but Amber can probably double check that for me as well. The question will have either, like, if it's the one from the Twin Trinity of Sin. We're talking about a double use of one of the utility powers, of course, being Outwit, Probability Control, or Perplex. I'm pretty sure that the question is Perplex, so I'm going on my base assumption on that. I might be wrong. Correct me down there. Now, that said, let's talk about that team. First, I want to point out that this was very specifically not allowed to use resources, or tactics, rather. It was modern age, no tactics. Theme teams were allowed. No figures larger than a peanut base. So when they say no tactics, no resources, no feed cards. Now, I don't consider that too much of a limitation. I can see that changing the game with the allowance of resources, as we discussed earlier in this episode. So, going down, I don't want to talk too much in depth with regards to the teams and how they worked. The winner clearly had a lot more utility in his team than most of the other teams, especially when you consider that Dark Phoenix has got incredibly high range, move and shoot powers, pulse wave, a modicum of awesomeness for her stats, as well as a stop click at the very end of her dial with a very high defense. You got the question, which is, of course, a utility figure at 100 points. Brother Voodoo. And the GCPD motorcycle at 19 points, of course, with a barrier is amazing. So, all in all, a very, very awesome, well put together team. I can't fault them on it. And then looking down the list, there's a figure that's shown up a couple times on a couple of these teams that I have not actually had a chance to test. I have looked at, but only briefly, and didn't realize how much potential he had, and that was the Iron Pharaoh. The Iron Pharaoh has a potential of being able to sit back in the starting area and move his little bird thing to base his range out of that. In addition to which, he's got the mystical keyword. I missed him in the mystical episode because I don't have him. He's a chase. The Iron Pharaoh is quite good, to say the very least. Yeah. Couple other figures that I see here that have shown up. Of course, the Scarlet Witch from the Fast Forces. Made a lot of teams. Brother Voodoo is in 6 out of the top 16 teams. Yeah. He's good. Here's the thing. Brother Voodoo's not watchlist potential. I'm going to defend that to the death. What he is really good, and he's a prime. So, I mean, all in all, it's really hard to kind of go, Brother Voodoo, you shouldn't be using him all you meta. Well, no, he's a very good figure who can do a lot and doesn't take a lot of your actions to do it and can really turn your opponent's team against him. Hence why I suggested the idea of Iron Fist with a Battle Fury Super Strength. You can pretty much just turn off Brother Voodoo that way. Well, mostly turn off. I mean, he still can do 2 damage. Yeah. A couple of Dark Phoenixes on quite a few teams. But there was a lot of variety for the most part. I mean, there was, with the exception of the Brother Voodoo and the Iron Pharaoh showing up an awful lot. Ironmonger shows up on a couple teams, but none of them are uber menchy like teams. So, congratulations to all the guys that did well in that tournament. I wish the next group of ROC players all the luck as well. And just thanks for giving us an insight into what's out there and showing us that there is more than, resources, etc. in the game. And congratulations to Patrick Yipjoko. I hope I didn't brutalize your name.